Welcome to the next episode of the Coaching Couch podcast. My name is Katrin. I'm a coach from Switzerland, and with me, as always, is Kitty. Hi there, Kitty.
Hey, good evening. I'm Kitty, still calling in from Breda in the Netherlands. One of the agile coaches from the community, amongst which is Dennis, our guest today.
Hi, Dennis.
Nice being here with you. As you already said, my name is Dennis. I am, as in this round, obviously also one of those coaches, living a little bit in between Switzerland and the Netherlands in Germany, close to Munich. I'm happy to be here on this nice podcast and hope to have a great evening talking with you guys.
Oh, we're sure that's going to happen because we have a topic that the three of us are all passionate about. It's games in business and using games. I met both of you at an unconference called Play for Agile that focuses on how to use games in coaching and in business. And I was wondering how you guys first got in touch with playing in business and games in business.
Wow, that's such a deep question to start with.
What was the first time that you encountered a game as part of a business? Or in a job? Because for me, it was something that I always liked playing, and I like, tinkering, but I never would have thought it's okay to bring Lego to an office. And I was wondering, when was the first time that I actually got in touch? And I was wondering how that was for you. Do you remember?
That is actually many years back in workshops, so to speak. But I think the first distinctive thing where I understood games as a means to teach was in my first training, the first Scrum course that I took, trying to become CSM.
So you folded paper planes like everybody else?
Actually, no, it was a ballpoint game.
Okay.
That got me, like, I've observed games as a means to keep people, energized in a workshop, but that was the real first time when I saw it being used to explain stuff.
Do you remember what you thought at the time when they announced we're going to play a game?
That's too far.
No? Okay, to see, Dennis is such a long time agilist. He doesn't even remember the beginnings of it.
Yes, unfortunately.
It's been a while. What about you, Kitty? Do you remember?
I think one of my first encounters was I did some workshops with Dave Gray. And since he's doing game storming and such, I think it's one of the first encounters that, at least that I remember. Maybe there was something before, but at least in the agile context, let's say, and I think it's in the business context, is through Dave Gray's game storming. And I really like it, but it was in a workshop setting, so I knew what I was getting into, let's say. So it's different than being in the workplace itself and then, hey, let's do a game or something. So I was really enthusiastic, and he's a great guy who can enthusiastically, take you down any road. And I remember we did some games and we did drawings. I think that was one of my first encounters. And then a couple of years after, I went to Play for Agile, and then it all kicked off, and I started using it myself more and more.
I first encountered it as a professional means, I think, in a course I took on team coaching. In group dynamics, it's used often because they say that if you get people in a room and you try to get them to talk about, what are some of the problems you guys have as a team? they will not voice them, and it's going to be hard for them to even have observed what's going on in their team. So you have to play a game where they can observe themselves playing, so they have material to talk about. Like, you see, you took the dice first, and you always just, start doing things without discussing it with us. So that's when I learned about, oh, that's actually, it makes it easier to talk about things if you can talk about a game than talking about real life. And like, in the end, you wrap it around and go like, okay, so how does this apply to our everyday lives? And that's when I really, I mean, I have fun playing games, but when I really understood, like, wow, this is serious play. This is something that psychologists have used for a long time, and wow, there's so much potential behind it. And that's what I think, in the end, one of the reasons why I found Play for Agile interesting, as a concept. I wouldn't have known what to do with, we play games and Agile, if I hadn't known about that. And then I went there and met you guys. But you've been obviously there longer than I have. When was your first Play for Agile? Do you remember?
2013 for me.
I have to admit that I have lost track of those different events at that location in Rückersbach. To be honest, I was at my second coach camp in Rückersbach when I sat down and having a conversation with Olaf Lewitz, who told me about the Play for Agile, which I was not aware it even existed. So I was not searching for that while it kind of found me. And obviously I tried to not miss any. I think I missed one since my first, when I couldn't make it schedule wise, but this is like a very fixed point in my calendar.
Yeah, so Play for Agile is the unconference. We're going to post a link in the description to this video for those of you who don't know it. There's a Play for Agile in North America as well. For those of you who can't make the trip across the pond, of course, currently nobody makes any trips anywhere because we're all in lockdown. But we are hoping that it's going to take place again next year. So my next question is, what kind of games do you use when you play, or have you used? What's your favorite game to use?
So obviously you are into the hard questions right from the start. We are not having a mellow start in here.
No.
Like, how much time do we have for this? Because the list is going to be long, right?
As much as you want, and you get to pitch your book. Dennis written a book about games in business. You should really keep listening to this podcast, because he's going to talk about it at some point.
Okay, so let's get it out of the way so we can really get down to business. This might be actually quite a good answer to your question. The games in the book are a kind of good compilation of games that I play. It's not complete, so there are games in this book. No, other way around. There are games that I play during trainings and stuff which did not make the book, and as I did not write the book alone, but there was a co-author, there are actually also a few games in the book that I have not used myself in a work scenario, but only know them from co-hosting or just talking with my co-author about them. So as you already mentioned, trying to show it in a way that it's hopefully visible, but light is a problem. It's called Agile Games in German, a very small book, so the size is literally one important thing, as the intention is just a small handbook that you can actually carry with you in your bag. Just a collection of games of different intentions, maybe is the best word that comes to my mind when I try to talk about that, and that might be the bigger contribution that Mark and myself actually did, because we didn't invent a single game in that book. It was just, we sat down and we said, there's so many games that we are using, and we are teaching, young Scrum Masters and product owners and other people running workshops in our role as coaches, teaching those people to do games and giving them lists of those games. And then, depending on setup, you actually cannot give much more help than that. So when we talked about that actually at a conference with another coach, a good friend of us called Rolf, he then said, yeah, it sounds like there should be a book for that. And we all agreed. And then Rolf looked at us and said, yeah, why don't you write it? And we were literally both a little bit set back for I don't know, 5-10 seconds. And then, yeah, you're right, we should just write it. And so we did. And that's a funny thing to be really honest with you. I would never have expected that. And now that it happened, it is cool because I now have this reference that I can talk about. I've had that for other tools, like, retrospectives. There's a few books, both in German and English, that I can just give to people in starting out in that job. But there wasn't for games. What I used for years is, of course, tell people go to Tasty Cupcakes, which still is awesome and cool, but it's huge. And there's no guideline for somebody who is new to that. So therefore, that was what we actually added. Collecting some of our favorites, but also some we just think might make sense. Categorize them to make that a little bit more helpful, and then put a little bit of extra help towards it. So tips for debriefing, because Mark and myself were doing that for quite a few years. And I think that is probably one important aspect to bring out here. Playing games and not talking about what happened is just fun, which might be okay, but especially when it comes to the business, that's like an important aspect. How to debrief, how to really give people more than just an enjoyable, whatever, 30 minutes, something they really can take out of that experience.
Yeah, it really depends on the objective, I'd say. Considering, which game to play and how you debrief it, because I remember I do the ballpoint game, the penny game, and the Kanban pizza game quite a lot. And depending on the audience, you debrief, or how the game runs out, let's say. You highlight certain stuff, and then you can bring it along afterwards as well. A couple of weeks later, you can reference back to the when we played the game, remember that this and this happened. And so it's not just for the period of the time that you play the game, but also for after. And you can throw in extra stuff as well. I use story cubes a lot, but sometimes just to get people to talk, or to make things more light, I'd say.
I think there is a huge variety. I don't debrief Happy Salmon. There's no need for that, obviously.
Happy Salmon is a game that's more of an energizer. It's a children's game where you get to high five and fist bump, and you get to happy salmon with other people, which exactly. I don't have here because I'm self-isolated.
It's just, and you use the term, and we have several of these. It's just an energizer, a typical workshop scenario. People coming back from lunch are being a little bit tired, a little bit out of focus. How to bring them back into that workshop statement. A game like that is perfectly suited for that. So that's a tool I just use when running full-day workshops. But then again, there's of course different aspects. There's important aspects. There's Kitty, you just mentioned 3 games that not only are all of them in the book, but they are really like very important ones. Many of them are there to illustrate a concept, or even more concepts, or even a methodology. So
to stimulate, really. I mean, the Kanban pizza game is a simulation of Kanban,
Yes.
of the method Kanban. You could call it a simulation. You know, it's not really a game. I'm not sure if people perceive it as a game really, or if people just perceive it as a simulation during the workshop.
I intentionally use or avoid the word game depending on what I actually want to achieve, and a little bit of the feedback of the audience. So when doing something that I really want a long-term effect in a very skeptic environment, I would try to avoid the word game and I would just call it a simulation. In a very playful area, I would probably call the most complex simulation still just a game. How about we just play a game? So this is really very much depending on circumstance. We had that discussion, and we do have a feedback on the Amazon comments page to our book that somebody said there's no real content, it's only games, you should have more like simulations. And I'm like, okay, thanks for the feedback. I think we do have quite a lot of simulations in there, and that's probably a nice little story. Before publishing the book, the publisher asked us about the title, and we were running under the working title of Agile Games quite a while. And then we started having a discussion, should we call it simulations? Just because of this, people might not like game in a work environment, and for a specific kind of audience, this might be a problem. But then again, Mark and me being who we are, we discarded that and said, no way, this is about games, so let's call it games. And then when we had that first feedback with the lecturer from the publisher, she said, "Oh, that's awesome, because simulation would not have fitted on the book title anyhow." So yeah,
It was too long.
it was too long. Yeah, it's a small book.
It would have been very weird to read a book called Agile Simulations, as in, who would want to read about a book about something that's not really happening? It's like, we'll just simulate that, you know, it's not for real, not for real. It's just a simulation. It's just, let's pretend, you know. I don't think people would have understood if you would have called it a simulation or agile simulations.
Katrin, do you have one or a couple of games that you prefer to play?
There's a wide gap between what I like to play and what I actually use in in coaching. What I've used a lot is the ballpoint game to in the Scrum trainings that I did, I used a game to show people estimating in points. I made them estimate complexity of building Lego. So I just gave them pictures of Lego stuff, and I said, estimate that. So that's kind of you could call it a game that I did. The environments that I work in tend to be a little more business-ishy, and I've struggled to introduce things such as Lego Serious Play, because I felt people didn't take it seriously. The feedback that I got was that people found it childish, and they thought I wasn't taking them seriously, even though it is a very serious method and a lot can come from it, but they weren't ready for it. And so I'm very cautious about using it. And as you said, Dennis, it's a lot about who are these people? Are they open to more let's call them more creative methods, or are they more conservative and not used to you know, all the colorful stickies on the wall and all the let's do things differently kind of thing that we might be used to. Me personally, I love Lego Serious Play. It's one of the things that I find probably are really underrated, because it was all to go for a while in the Agile community. Like, everybody did everything with Lego, and I've been to meetups where people got their Legos out and other people just straight left because they couldn't just bear just yet another Lego thing. but I think it's really underestimated. I've used it in one-on-one coachings, and it's really impressive what you can get out of it. And it's you get to build something with your hands. You don't have to talk, you don't have to be able to draw, you just put stuff together and to express something that's hard to express with words. So that's one of my favorites. And I've always wanted to play Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes with a team. I currently have a team that probably could benefit off of the game, not the game itself, but the debriefing. That's what they could greatly benefit off. I'm not quite there yet with them to have them accept, let's play a game. But yeah, I struggle with introducing games as that feel more like games, such as Keep Talking, into business environments. That's what I found difficult.
I've had that same experience. I think there's many people who mistakenly, in my eyes at least, think that work must never be fun, and so they are really in this habit of not accepting anything that doesn't have this serious touch to it, at least not in a work environment. And I literally had that even for something as easy as an energizer. I had in an insurance company that I was working with a group of group leaders, the first line of management, next to the people doing the real work, as I often jokingly say. And there was one person who literally, he started doing it, and after, I don't know, 30 seconds, he dropped the cards, turned around and said, "That's nothing for me, I cannot do this." So I've learned it's really important to observe the group, to probably even try to figure out before what might happen, so to avoid that interruption of the game and that bad feelings that might arise from such a situation. And there's so many aspects to learn about. I literally had this this group of people where I prepared a workshop, and I was talking with other people, being in a little bit of an observer role, who said, maybe you should not be too much on the gaming part. We have disabled people sitting in a wheelchair, and that might be a problem, and so many aspects. Jordan, which we both, all three of us know quite well, he told me that he once had a happy session with a bunch of people where there's one person who was missing his left arm. So even this, body circumstance might be important when coming up with something. There are cultures where it's not okay to touch people in public. So if you run a workshop outside of your own culture, very important to learn about these things. So when you are invited to run such a thing in India, which of the games can you bring and which should you not? Whereas India is actually not really big of a problem, but one should at least think about these things and think about the cultural impact of these tools, because in the end it's tools and they can be misused.
They can be misunderstood, I would say.
Yes.
Yeah. But they can be misused too.
Misused not in an intentionally bad way, but in a not suited for the circumstance way, probably.
Mm-hmm. So talking about, what do you use games for? In workshops, or more towards coaching, more towards have you used them in retrospectives? What does one, if someone who's listening never has thought of using games in business, what would you say? What can you do with a game? You're author of the book, of the O'Reilly book, Agile Games. Not written a book yet.
Thanks for mentioning it over and over again. I like that. No, I think for me personally, it is almost exclusively in a workshop scenario, when I kind of mix together intentional training and just whatever we're working together situations. But it's normally not a one-on-one situation, but several people. And most of the time in that scenario, when I use them and I talk about them, it's like, you know, I'm the moderator, I'm somewhat on stage. So I bring them as a tool, probably put them on the agenda before or not, depending on circumstance. So
And what is it that you try to show people? Do you try to show them how their team is currently operating and how they might improve their collaboration, or is it to show them, I don't know, estimating or something else?
yeah. For example, I love the name game. I've never met a team that called somebody like me in my job that did not take on too much work. So trying to, as Kitty earlier said, trying to get them to talk about this situation. I try to have that simulation run once, let them experience firsthand the difference in working in parallel and working sequentially on the same job. Then debrief that, and then use that, as Kitty said, over and over again, even weeks later or months later. Guys, look at your board. You are again taking on, in my opinion, just too much work. Didn't we discuss that? How did it feel in the game that we played? Don't you remember? So,
And how do people react?
I've never been disappointed with running this specific game, for example. And sometimes it's even a little bit too much. So I've heard the CIO of a really big company, like several tens of thousands of people, tell me after running that simulation where he was in the workshop, yeah, today I learned that we are doing it wrong for the last 20 years. And I was like, okay, let's not over exaggerate that effect, but you're maybe right. But anyhow, it's a tool. I really can use it to bring something across, to have a little bit of an argument laying on the table, but not just because I said so, but because the people made that experience with their own hands and mouth and brains. Maybe the most important thing. So they experienced it. And then I can talk about how the simulation might be different from real life and how it might not be and why that might be the case.
Yeah, that's what I love about playing games or simulations, is that you really can experience them with your emotions. When you're getting frustrated in the game because you constantly have to wait on someone else to finish their task, or you don't have a certain piece that you need to finish to build whatever you're building, you experience the emotion, and it's very put in the point. And if you are in a working environment, things might be a little more hidden, waiting for someone to finish their things. And that frustration that can build up in such a situation it's not as tangible, it's not as strong a feeling, and it's very hard to put your finger on it. And people tend to not call out other people on it as they do in a game. Like in a game, they will say, it was very frustrating having to wait all the time for getting the next part to be able to continue. And people will probably not voice that so much in a professional environment because they fear, politics, or they don't want to speak badly about their coworkers. So it makes
Yeah,
playing a simulation makes it much easier to talk about things.
I think especially that you can say, okay, I had to wait for this part to be finished, and not say I had to wait for you as a person, because it's not the person's fault. It's the system dynamics.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's more easy to talk about those unpleasant things when in a game context. because it's more objective, and you can have a laugh about it. So it's not as ooh, I cannot touch this subject, or the person might be offended or whatever. You talk about the game and such. Also, when you bring it back weeks later or even months later, when you talk about that again, especially if you know that there are some maybe lack of trust within the group, and you can bring the game as an excuse to talk about it again. Sometimes it might be the right thing to do.
Yeah, it gives you something to talk about and something that's safe to talk about, because it's really there. Everybody can see that piece that you needed to finish your work, that whatever piece it was, you know, piece of puzzle or piece of Lego or whatever you used in your game, and some in the a lot of our clients do intangible work. You know, it's writing software, or getting an email is not as tangible as I was waiting for that thing. And nobody can see it because only you see your emails, but everybody can see that you did not get that piece of puzzle that you would have needed to finish your thing. So it makes it much easier to talk about, and it's much easier to talk about how the game is dumb because the game makes me wait, and that rule is stupid, and we should change the game rules because it's frustrating to play like this. And that's, I think people are much more willing to say than they would talk about their own company and the rules or processes that they are playing by in an everyday situation.
Absolutely.
That's very true. Yeah. So have you guys ever come up with your own game? Or most games that I play, you know, the ones that we mentioned so casually, you will find them on Tasty Cupcakes. So I'll post a link in the description. Such as the name game or the Kanban pizza game. Obviously, everybody knows those games. Totally, never had to Google any of them. Don't feel bad if you don't know those games. Some games we know, and we know other coaches know, and some games you might not know, and feel free to Google them or to ask in the comments. You don't have to know every last game on the planet. It's impossible.
You can't.
No, you can't. There are just too many, and people have different names for different games, so don't feel bad if you don't know the games that we're talking about. But the games that I use and the games that I know are usually things that I learned about, as I said, in that team coaching course that I took, or in the or from someone conference where someone presented them. How about you guys?
I think the games that I use, I've experienced myself first before using them as a facilitator or as a coach. So I don't think there's a game that I use commonly which I just read about or something. I don't know.
Have you ever
by recollection
game like let's invent a game?
No.
Okay.
I've tried to build on an S3 game last year and did some intensive work on that, and then time or other priorities came first. So that diminished again, but that's still on my bucket list to make a game out of some concepts of sociocracy.
Nice. I never did finish creating a game. I did contribute to a few of these let's invent or create a game session at conferences like the Play for Agile. I think I was in that very first session when we talked about Cards Against Agility years ago. So,
well, that's also on an existing game. Cards Against Humanity is a game, and then someone did Cards Against Agility.
So that's, I was there and left when they made it more serious, because it was just too much hard work, which I was not up to at that moment. Other than what Kitty just said, I literally did that trying to find a game for a specific purpose, and scanning Tasty Cupcake for it and trying it a few times. But I have to admit, this is a lot harder. So it's always easier and more intuitive to take on the games that you have played when somebody else
experienced, rather than just reading about them on a paper and go like, oh yeah, this is gonna work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I may be lucky, especially being in such a community and being on conferences and unconferences where you can just try out stuff and you can meet people who have so much experience. I'm always amazed by, I think I mentioned him earlier, Jordan, always coming up with something new. At this year's Play for Agile, which was fortunately early enough in the year to be
Not
still
cancelled.
happening. Again, he brought a game which I liked so much that I immediately bought it on my phone while we were still playing the first round because it was such an awesome game.
Which game was that?
It's called Spyfall. Yet another social deduction game, which is another Werewolf and Secret Hitler, another nice game. So to just throw a few of those names towards the audience of the podcast, you may have fun trying to find out about these because they are awesome. Maybe a little bit less serious, but still also great tools. And as you mentioned, Katrin, earlier, they might be really, really valuable tools, even for the non-psychologists to work on team dynamics, to find out how people are actually communicating with each other. And
well, that's a psychology topic. I mean, a lot of the things that we use in an agile context and that people boast at conferences and unconferences about, I have this new concept about, when you do this to a team, that happens. I'm like, yeah, there's a bunch of paper been written about that in the 60s in a different field. It's called psychology. And if you bother to read up on it, you would have known. But and that surprises me. People take those concepts that have been known to psychologists for a long time and they wrap them in shiny candy paper and sell them as something totally new, and then the whole community runs after them. And it's sometimes a little bit like people act as if we're inventing this totally new stuff all the time. For some, yes, some things are new, and I wish the psychology community would know more about it, about the whole agile coaching thing, because I think the cross-pollination between the two would be awesome. Organizational psychologists have been working with companies doing team building for years, just not necessarily in IT. Mostly in hospitals or in other places where people die if we collaborate badly. And they know few about agile. And on the other hand, I find that we as people who coach mostly in IT, frankly, or in technical companies, and I know you don't only coach in IT, Kitty, but as people who tend to lean more towards the technical side, we could benefit off of at least knowing what's out there, in psychology literature, because some of this stuff is really cool. Like the group dynamics is two things really. Group dynamics is a description of what happens in a group, like the dynamics of a group as they get together and get to know each other. But it's also a method. It's a method of playing games with a group, and the best thing about it is the moderator does not take part. The moderator you start a group dynamic session with everybody sitting in a circle, and what people think is the moderator just sits in a corner and does nothing. I mean, they're there if you want to ask them a question, if you want to ask their help, but it's not like they start the workshop or anything. They let the group do that. And their entire retreats, like week-long retreats where it's basically locked in a hotel, you can't get out. And the group has to figure out on their own what they want to do. And has to figure out like, okay, so there's not even a task. Like they're not even given a task as in here's a piece of Lego, or here's I want you to build this bridge out of paper, as you know, in common team building workshops. It's just nothing, and it lets people boil there for a while. And most people, I really, really, really want to go. It's super intense, and the people that I know who have been to such retreats, they say they recommend it highly. But you need probably a week of vacation before and one after, because
well, that sounds familiar.
You mean to play for Agile on conferences?
Yeah,
it's really intense. But that's originally it was, I mean, if you don't mind me talking about that, originally it was a way of trying to find out how about the psychology of groups. It was an experiment. So they got a bunch of people together, and they had a bunch of people around just watching them and trying to describe what they observed happening in the group. And they discussed that in the evening. And then at some point, the participants said, well, we'd be really interested in what you guys are discussing. Can we take part? And so that's now the kind of the way it's set up is during the day, the group does its thing, and in the evening, everybody gets together and talks about what happened. You know, what happened when we discussed topic X, what happened when Joe suddenly started to do push-ups because he was bored. How did that change the situation in the group, and things like that. And that's how people learn about some of the dynamics that really happen in teams or in groups in general. It's really fascinating.
It's interesting. Sounds interesting. Yeah.
It is. It's in the end what got me studying psychology. I was like, I want to know everything about this.
Give me more tools how to mess with people's minds.
I don't want to mess with people's minds. I want to free people's minds. This is what I'm going to toss another word out there, which is liberating structures, which is a collection of ways in which you can organize a discussion in a big group. If you just get everybody in a circle and go like, talk, with 20 people, that's not going to happen, or it's not going to happen in a very constructive way. And you know, organizing the discussion differently in such a big group is a good idea. And liberating structures is a collection of structures that liberate the group to talk about it. And I really, really like the expression liberating structure. It's enough structure so that the content can be liberated, so that things work, but not too much structure, not so much as to hinder. And I think games in very much the same way should be liberating. They should free people to talk about things, to express things that they find easy, that they find hard to say with words, that they don't even kind of know they were thinking or feeling. Yeah. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I also think that when you're playing a game, because I catch myself sometimes afterwards, you know, when you're really into the game, you forget about certain rules or things that you are accustomed to doing with, you know, not deliberately thinking about it. And then you go for your own pitfalls or whatever.
Oh, yes.
And that's also really, really constructive to once in a while play one of your own games again, which you use in workshops, to not fall into the trap, or do fall into the trap and recognize what is happening, because yeah, it's the common things that make us human.
Absolutely. The cool thing is, two of the games that I really love playing, both in the work setup and outside of it, actually have to do with bending those rules. That is so awesome. Like the Human Knot, which is a game where you just have a bunch of people extending their arms, and then like they're standing in a big circle, they extend their arms, and then they walk towards each other, and try to grab other hands, and thereby creating a big mess. And then the task is to form back into the circle, but the rule is do not let go. And once you get to the second stage of this game, which is then not having this done by external control, but self-organized by the members, I have seen that so many times when people just, two people look each other in the eye and say, okay, we now have to perform a complicated task, which might even hurt us. And the rule is to not let go. But let's just agree that we let go for a second and grab again, and everything is going to be fine. And this is such a magical moment when I observe that as a facilitator of the game. I love that so much.
What do you say when you observe that?
It is the intentional rule breaking, but discussing it, agreeing on it, thinking about what the impact of that is, which is so much easier in such an easy setup with a game that just said, the rule, nobody is going to die, like when you said earlier in hospital scenario or something. It is an easy thing to try out how to really work with rules as a group, how to discuss when to bend or when to even break rules, and when it's okay and when it's probably not okay. The group does a tremendous work, and all groups I have ever seen doing that do a tremendous work in fine-tuning and balancing that. When they break or bend the rules, it's okay, it's human to do so, but they would not kind of just everybody let go and then form the circle and grab again and to have the easy way. Because of the playfulness, they want to adhere to the rule, they want to play the game following the rules, but they don't want to be hurt by it. And that's like, what is more human than that?
I also like the impossible games, like the Helium Stick or of some sorts. I mean, it's hilarious, and especially how people respond to each other.
So quickly explain the Helium Stick, if you will.
Yeah, well, you have a stick or whatever, and you start at a certain height, like say knee height or whatever, and
people have it on their fingers, like they're balancing. Yeah. Balancing.
You can only use the
one
two
stick.
fingers.
20 people balance it on their fingers, the same stick.
Yeah, and it has to go. It has to go down. You have to put it on the floor, but it cannot leave your fingers. And when you do with multiple people, and you go, so like if you did like this, and then there's another person in between, so you're not touching your hands are, there is somebody in between, and it's impossible. And instead of going down, it goes up, hence the Helium Stick, because it goes up. And then
even though the task is to put it down.
Yeah, people start to blame each other, or no, you did this, or indeed somebody just lets go or steps aside or whatever it is. It's great fun to see the dynamics of the group trying to bend, break, or adhere to the rules. It's fascinating.
I've seen it working exactly once, and I actually was part of a group who did that. We were shown this game by one of our teachers, and we were studying this whole topic that we were studying together was mental training in sports, and visualization is an important part of that. So we were standing there and we realized, like, the stick is going up, why is it not going down? And we stopped and we're like, what can we do? And then someone said, let's all imagine the stick is really heavy. And then we just all imagined the stick is really heavy, and then it started to sink. But the moment you start realizing that that works is when it stops working.
Nice.
It's really hard. I mean, if you ever have the chance, just grab a long stick and a bunch of friends and try to keep your fingers, like, don't go away from the stick, but make it go down together. Really hard.
Keep touching.
That's fun. Yeah, I've tried to invent games. I was asking you guys about having invented games. I was trying to invent games, but I really struggle. I think a good game takes a lot of time to invent, to balance, really, so that it's not lopsided. Like, yeah, once you have the blue chip, you basically have won, even though the game goes on for another 4 hours. And I admire people like I don't know who came up with the ballpoint game, but I'm really impressed with how well it works, and how well it's balanced, and how well certain things translate to the real world. Yeah.
I don't know either, but it's a great game.
I could look it up in the book, but I don't remember.
Yeah, everybody can look up. Say, hey Siri.
What did she say, Siri?
I have my my phone in airplane mode, so I don't know.
Okay, that's a good idea for a podcast.
Mm.
I was just thinking we could try and play Dungeons and Dragons in an agile way.
Yeah,
the
why
first
not?
question coming to my mind would be why?
Why?
Why not?
Why not?
Why not?
Knew it.
That's when did we say whose motto is that gonna be? It's just gonna be like mine, yours, ours. It's just why not is our motivation from now on. It's just why not. It's I think with a certain geek crowd, you could actually get them in. You know, if you know those people like playing, say, Dungeons and Dragons, you could go like, oh, right, so let's play a quest themed with what I want to talk about. A certain kind of people would go like, all right, I love playing that game, so let's play.
Absolutely. We have this this expression in German, which is literally translated as head cinema, which happens right now. I imagine this happening in my head.
What's the expression?
Head cinema would be the
Kopfkino.
You know, exactly.
Yeah,
I have no idea if that is a thing, if it even works, but yeah, I can literally see a few people sitting around the table trying that, and
I can see a play for agile session, people working out such a thing. That's totally kind of thing we would be doing, and of course, you know, the social playing that takes place there as well, playing werewolves and other social deduction games, or PowerPoint karaoke, which is also a fun way of learning, and a fun way, yeah, to learn to deal with your stage fright. As I found, is a. I mean, you are going to fail in PowerPoint karaoke. There's just no way, because if you're too good, they just will start cycle through slides that make no sense until you crack. But I found it's a very fun way to get over stage fright. You just get out there, and everybody laughs not at you, but at what's going on the slides. And so it's a fun way of trying out new things without it being you know, you're not put on the spot without it being dangerous in a way.
And again,
I'm more for rhetoric than in that manner.
The game rhetoric?
Yeah, like the public speaking. Yeah, it's a public speaking game. Maybe similar to PowerPoint karaoke, but not as silly. And also a big part, and I think that lacks with the PowerPoint karaoke, is that you actually give feedback to people how to perform or how to be.
We normally don't give in PowerPoint karaoke. We don't give feedback.
Yeah.
It's a part of rhetoric.
Other than just loads of laughs, of course.
Yes, it's usually yeah. But in rhetoric, I think it is you throw dice and then it tells you what you have to talk about or something like that.
Yeah, it tells you like a topic, or depending on the color. But you also have this dynamic of maybe go from high to low in using your voice. or go through like sum up the 1, 2, 3, or I don't know, good, better, best.
I remember I had to tell a fairy tale backwards.
Yeah, for instance. Yeah.
You're given a task
So
like
there's
that.
different ways that you can speak or use your voice or use the stage or whatever. Sometimes you have to dance, whatever it is that you need to discuss or talk about. Yeah, all
You mean
those
dancing as in
different ways.
expressing your thoughts in a dancey way instead of using.
Yes. Yeah. So more using your body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a challenge.
It can be. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen people gamify their exercise in that way. It says they have dice, and roll the dice, and whatever the dice says. If it's a 6, you get to do push-ups. If it's a 4, you get to do crunches. And the other dice is for how many you do. And then it's not a boring, exercise program where you keep doing the same things in the same way over and over again, but you gamify it a bit to make it a little more interesting.
Yeah.
So obviously, while you just said you gamify stuff to not make it boring, the interesting thing is that humans seem to be built that way, that gamifying stuff actually works and has an impact. And that seems to be so universal that I don't think there's a disagreement between the three of us. Gaming things just works. It is one of the best possible ways to actually reach out to humans, to enable them to make their own experiences in some ways and to be actually interested in the way to get there. And this makes it so powerful and so important as a tool.
Yeah, it's not dangerous, and it's actually my theory that playing is the natural state of a human. That's something that I learned when I studied psychology. I'm not sure if I've mentioned it before. I read about a study that said if you can train animals to do certain tricks if you reward them with food. Like you can make a dog sit by giving it a cookie enough times. It knows when you say sit, it will sit down and gets a cookie. And you can train a bunch of animals to do all kinds of different things. Also in exchange for so-called tokens. So instead of giving them a cookie, which will stop working from the moment they're no longer hungry, you can train them to accept a kind of plastic coin, a token, which they will come to find valuable because they can exchange the token for food later on. So you first train them on that, and then you just give them a token every time they do things right, and that will keep working because they're never stuffed enough. So you can use those token economies to train animals to do all sorts of stuff. But the interesting thing is, after a while of not being properly trained anymore, they will shift towards their natural behavior. So if you give 2 tokens, and I'm looking up the correct English word now. If you give 2 tokens to a raccoon, they will not do the trick, but they will start rubbing them against each other. Because raccoons in nature, what they do is they grab 2 stones and they rub them against each other. That's a natural thing for them. If they're holding 2 stones, they rub them against each other. So as soon as they have 1 token, they will run to the token bank to get food. But if they have 2 tokens, they will start rubbing them against each other because that's what they naturally do. And like other animals will start to dig a hole and hide it in the ground or do things like that when at some point when you stop training. So and the point that they were making in the paper is that you should if you're training animals to do a certain thing, it should be something that's natural to them, like that's close to a natural behavioral state, so that they don't deviate from the desired behavior too much. And I thought, well, if it's natural for a raccoon to rub 2 stones together, and that's what they naturally gravitate to doing, what's the natural state of a human? And to me, the thing that I came up with, and that's very unscientific, is that a human is designed to play. If you give a human a pen, and they're bored. They will start playing with it. They will start doing something. Give someone a ball. No one's able to stand still holding a ball. It's impossible. They will start playing with it. And I think everybody does that to a certain degree. And playing really is the primary way through which children learn. How they learn about things, like, oh, if I touch this is how it feels, but also about they train their own abilities to manipulate things and to find out about their environments, about their own abilities. Therefore, I think playing is underestimated as something that we are wired to do as humans. And it's, it's like, it's for children or for your free time. And I think we're really wasting a lot of potential there by thinking in that way. So I think playing is a natural human state that should be exploited.
That's a nice thought, definitely.
And you don't gamify, but just putting playful colors on things. If you have a stupid work environment and you just paint the walls red, green, and yellow, you still have a stupid work environment, but now it's colorful. That's not how to make it playful. It takes a little more than that.
I think I know companies who try, but yeah.
I've worked in one. Doesn't work. I think you got to be careful not to make it not to mix up gamifying with competition. That would be very dangerous.
Yeah, well, that depends on the game that you use, obviously. Because some games are really, that you go into the competition side of things.
Yeah, but then you should use them only in a workshop, not to gamify the work environment. Like, let's reward the team.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Well,
that's gonna destroy morale. That's not gamifying. That's just competition.
Then again, I think the competition kind of naturally arises, even when it's not intended. I mentioned the name game earlier, but also, Kitty, you said the penny game, which I think I know under coin flip, but I would assume it's the same game. When I run this in workshops with more people, I form groups, and the groups will start competing against each other, even if I tell them not to.
Oh, yeah.
They will compare their times, even if it doesn't make any sense because they are set up differently. That's what they do. I observe that all the time.
Oh yeah, that's the natural behavior of people in groups. Yeah, that absolutely. They do that. It's called in-group and out-group. I could go on. I study too much lately. I have an exam in 6 weeks. I'm sorry. That is natural. I was more, and it's a thing to reflect on in a workshop. Is like, did you see what happens? I have run workshops using Lego, where the task was that they build a Lego city, one Lego city. And there were 3 tables with Lego on them, and people refused to share Lego bricks among the tables, even though they were building one city together. And it tells you a lot about that team as a facilitator. Like, wow, I understand why things are the way they are in your company now if nobody wants to share anything. Yeah, I was more referring to if you're talking outside of a workshop, like gamifying the work environment. I remember there was an app that tried to gamify, I think it was exercise. Like it was a bit like a game where you could win points for exercising, and then you would, get things like funny avatars and stuff. I would not recommend turning a working environment long-term into a game, because that's just a competition, and that is not fun. I think the point about a game is that you use the playfulness and the fun and the lightness of it being a game. And also in those games, I mean, there's lightness in that competition. There is fun in that competition. It's not too serious. You should use that. And as soon as it gets real serious, like let's pay people more money if they win, then it's no longer a game, in my opinion. And the two
I think it depends on what you want out of it. I mean, if the objective is to get people to get accustomed to a certain type of behavior, I think it's okay that you can gamify those aspects, but then stop once you've learned that the wanted or needed behavior is there. I mean, I think with kids, now that they have to wash their hands, or everybody has to wash their hands more often and better, you can gamify that up until the point that you make a habit out of it, and then you can let go. So not as a means, but yeah, you can use it to some extent. I think it's not bad per se.
Yeah, and I currently cannot see any weird side effects like trying to sabotage other people for to make them wash their hands worse, or something like that. Yeah,
but at a certain moment, it's, you know, it doesn't add any value anymore to gamify the washing of hands. I mean, if it's your common behavior, it's fine. And then, I don't know, the competitions, it seems silly. But at the start, hey, it could be fun. Yeah.
Yeah, to introduce something new and make it fun. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I think when we mentioned games in business, we were initially talking about using games in workshops and those scenarios, and not over a longer period of time, like gamify workplace over 2 months. I've never done that. I would be too scared of the side effects. I'd be very, very wary introducing some things. Have you guys ever done such a thing?
Partially on like a knowledge center in company, where you gamify up until a certain extent so that people better share their knowledge or come up with new ideas. Or
how does that work? So how was it gamified? Did you get points or stars or?
No, you get votes from other people. So in that sense, not points, but more like nice things or whatever nice and shiny would be, but not points as in 1, 2, 3 or 10, 20 gazillion, but more like apples and oranges as a comparison. So not by numbers.
Mm-hmm. And they're virtual.
Virtual, yes.
Virtual shiny things, not real shiny things, as in you wrote a lot of knowledge articles, therefore you get this shiny mug.
No, I know some companies who have, but that doesn't really make any sense.
No, I don't think so.
Me, at least, but yeah.
But then again, the virtual stuff works quite well. The whole internet works with likes, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, whether that works well is
you want some recognition. You want some recognition from your peers or from the social community that you belong to. And if it's at work, it's your coworkers, and if it's your friends, it could be likes or whatever it is on the social media that some people use. But then again, you see that some people only want to share nice things because otherwise they don't get likes. So it's different, but yeah, it's like you want recognition. We're social persons. I mean, we need company and we need peers also to learn from. So yeah, I think it could be, it could work really well.
Nice.
Yeah. So I think that brings today's podcast to an end.
Think so? Dennis, anything you want to add or include, or did we?
Do you want to plug your book again, just in case people haven't seen it yet? Because it is by O'Reilly.
Maybe
no, it's not a self-published book. It's a real book.
It's a real book. Somehow I was able to convince a real publisher. I may add to this, like, thank you for inviting me, but I have to also pay big homages and acknowledge my co-author, Mark Bless. Again, showing it, I hope that it's visible at least a little bit.
Yeah.
I will put a link in the description if you give us one.
It is unfortunately currently only available in German, and the nice O'Reilly publisher will not publish it in English in the same series, which means we are currently searching for a different publisher for the English version. But yeah, that's just the way stuff goes. But we were unexpectedly successful with the book. So it sold more than 6,000 copies until now, and we ranked on Amazon Germany in the top 200 of all books, which I cannot still yet understand how that happened.
So you're
But
famous.
of course, I am sort of happy about it. Or as Mark always states, which I like, it says, it's all about infinite fame and richness. Of course, the richness stuff will not happen when getting a few cents per book, but yeah, at least it was a lot of fun doing that. I did learn a few things about that, especially writing the book together was really cool experience in having that peer feedback and talking about these things all the time.
And you're still friends.
And we are still friends, and we are still actually working on also other and more book projects. That's totally cool. And what I really enjoy is I think I know my way around games quite good, especially in an agile environment. But I could write the book without being the best expert in it. But now having that book, it helps me in even learning more about it because people address me with respect to that. So from the learning perspective, I can say, go ahead and write a book. That's a cool experience.
What a great way
Thanks
to
for
end
the
this
tip.
podcast. That's a great take-home message. So thanks everybody for listening. And as always, like, subscribe, and comment if you have any questions. Everything that we talked about is hopefully in the description below, and we'll see you in a month. Thank you too for being part.
Thanks
Bye.
all. Bye-bye.